Julian Harrington had spent most of his 34 years watching the world treat him as a prize rather than a person. As the CEO of Harrington Global, he was surrounded by people who admired him, envied him, or wanted something from him. Magazine covers called him America's most eligible CEO, but the more flattery he received, the more deeply he feared that none of it was real. Behind the glass walls of his corner office, he often stood alone, watching the Manhattan skyline with a quiet heaviness. Success had given him everything but peace. He had built an empire, yet had no idea whether anyone would care for him without the empire attached. This fear grew into an idea so unusual that even he questioned it at first, but once it settled in his mind, it refused to leave. He wanted to know how people treated him when he had nothing. Not when he was Julian Harrington, billionaire, but when he was simply Julian, an ordinary guy. And so the second life began. He constructed his disguise with meticulous care. From a hidden compartment in his penthouse, he pulled out a duffel bag filled with thrift store clothing, worn jeans, secondhand flannel shirts, and shoes with scuffed soles. He swapped his custom titanium watch for a scratched rubber band one. His hair, normally styled to perfection, was brushed into an intentionally messy look he practiced in the mirror. He prepared a backstory for himself, a struggling artist renting a cheap apartment in Brooklyn. He studied the neighborhood bus routes, learned which grocery stores offered the best discounts, and even practiced cooking with the old gas stove in the apartment he leased under a fake name. That stove, unpredictable and loud, nearly exploded the first time he lit it, a moment that made him realize just how far from his usual world he had traveled. Even simple tasks like riding the subway felt foreign. He clung awkwardly to the metal poles while commuters bumped him from all sides. He watched people move with the ease of long experience, while he tried to pretend he belonged. Every misstep reminded him that wealth had shielded him from the small, everyday challenges millions of people faced. Still, he pushed forward. He needed this. He needed to feel like a human being again. Julian's life in the Brooklyn apartment was quiet until he met Alina Ramirez. She arrived at his door one morning, wearing cleaning gloves and carrying a bag of supplies. The building manager had sent her to introduce herself. She worked part-time cleaning the property and offered additional freelance house cleaning to tenants. Julian had been startled at first, unused to unscheduled visits or conversations without formal greetings. Yet there was something instantly warm about Alina, a genuine kindness that contrasted sharply with the polished smiles he saw at corporate functions. She was 26, practical, and hardworking, a woman who carried the quiet dignity of someone who had learned to depend only on her own efforts. She spoke openly about her cleaning work, her long days, and her hopes of studying interior design someday. She spoke with no self-pity and no performance, simply honesty. For Julian, who had spent years surrounded by people who rehearsed their personalities like actors, her sincerity felt refreshing. When she noticed how lost he seemed in the neighborhood, she began showing him around. She walked with him to the diner that served cheap but surprisingly good coffee. She pointed out which grocery stores overcharged and which street vendors were trustworthy. She explained the small rhythms of life in the area, which nights the trash trucks came, which laundromats broke down, which parks were safest at dusk. Julian followed her with the awkward enthusiasm of someone experiencing real life for the first time. She laughed when he called the subway historic. She teased him for flinching at street dogs that barked too loudly. She helped him choose inexpensive items to make his apartment feel less empty. And slowly something meaningful began forming between them. Their conversations deepened. They shared little personal details, small jokes, and moments that made Julian forget his disguise entirely. They talked about their dreams, hers grounded and practical, his vague and carefully edited. He found himself drawn to her optimism, her resilience, and her ability to make even a simple walk to the corner store feel like an adventure. But every moment he spent with her added weight to the lie he was living. The guilt formed a knot in his chest, tightening each time she spoke with unguarded trust. She believed he was a struggling artist, scraping by on odd jobs and passion. She believed the mismatched furniture and prepaid phone reflected the life he lived. Every smile she gave him made the truth harder to keep. As weeks passed, their bond grew stronger. Julian's carefully planned experiment became something he no longer controlled. He looked forward to seeing Alina with an eagerness that surprised him. He watched her comfort elderly neighbors, carry heavy cleaning supplies with quiet toughness, and decorate her small notebook with interior design sketches she created during breaks at work. Julian admired her more each day, and admiration blended slowly into something deeper, something he refused to name because he had no right to feel it while hiding behind a false identity. The guilt grew heavier. He often sat alone in his apartment after she left, staring at the duffel bag that represented the lie. He considered confessing, but fear stopped him every time. He remembered her telling him once, casually, that dishonesty was the one thing she could never forgive. Trust mattered to her. She guarded it fiercely. Meanwhile, his real life waited impatiently in Manhattan. His assistant called with urgent updates. His board demanded his presence. His mother scheduled meetings with the children of politicians, convinced he needed an influential marriage. Julian's two worlds were colliding, and the moment of impact arrived sooner than he anticipated. The truth unraveled on a night when he least expected it. A call from his assistant informed him that the investors from Tokyo were arriving early and needed his attention immediately. Julian rushed back to his penthouse, still intending to return to Brooklyn afterward. But when he stepped inside his home, he found his penthouse maid, Clarissa, standing beside the open hidden panel. The disguise bag lay unzipped in front of her. Clarissa was not angry, only confused and worried. She asked if he was in some kind of trouble. She had never seen her employer hide clothing like that, much less items so different from his usual lifestyle. Julian barely had time to respond before the elevator doors opened again. Alina stepped into the penthouse. His assistant had escorted her up, thinking she was someone important when he saw her waiting outside the building. She had come to bring Julian a sketch she thought might inspire one of his paintings. She had wanted to surprise him. The surprise became hers instead. She froze at the sight of the luxurious penthouse, the sweeping windows, and the unmistakable wealth surrounding her. She saw the maid, the hidden bag, and Julian standing among it all, no longer in thrift clothes but in the suit of a billionaire. Everything clicked at once. She realized she did not know him at all. The humiliation was immediate and sharp. She had opened her life to him while he had fabricated an entire identity. She had shared dreams, hopes, and vulnerable moments, all while he observed her through the safety of a lie. Julian tried to explain, but the damage had already carved itself into her expression. She left the penthouse in silence, her steps quick and her eyes bright with hurt. Julian watched her disappear into the elevator, feeling more helpless than he ever had. He had built a fortune through strategy, planning, and control, yet he had no control over the mess he had created now. Days passed in a haze of regret. Julian threw himself into work, though his focus drifted constantly. He visited Alina's building several times but always found her avoiding him. He wrote long letters he never sent, recorded apology messages he could not bring himself to deliver, and spent long nights staring at the canvases in his apartment, unable to paint anything at all. Meanwhile, Alina struggled with her own turmoil. She wrestled with feelings of betrayal and the uncomfortable possibility that her connection with Julian had been genuine, despite the deception. She felt foolish for trusting him, yet she remembered moments that had felt undeniably real. The shared jokes, the sincere admiration in his eyes, the way he listened to her dreams with genuine interest. Her trust had been broken, but her emotions were not so easily erased. Eventually, Julian found her sitting alone on a park bench in the Brooklyn neighborhood, where their friendship had bloomed. The evening light softened the edges of everything, casting long shadows across the pavement. He approached quietly, not expecting forgiveness and not demanding a conversation. He simply wanted her to understand the truth behind his actions, that the deception had not been for amusement or cruelty, but born from an insecurity that had grown into desperation. Alina listened, though her expression remained guarded. She understood his loneliness, perhaps even sympathized with it. But the pain he caused her was still fresh. Trust for her was not something easily rebuilt. She told him she needed time. Not a closed door, but not an open one either. Julian accepted this with humility, knowing he had no right to ask for more. As he walked away from the park, he felt a small flicker of hope. Not certainty, not assurance, just the possibility that someday the truth of who he was beneath the wealth might be enough. The ending remained unknown. Whether they reconciled or drifted apart would be left for time to decide and for others to reflect on. In the end, Julian discovered that revealing who he was demanded far more courage than hiding behind a disguise. And Alina realized that walking away did not erase what they shared. It only reminded her that truth is the foundation of every connection worth holding on to.